Welcome once again to our show, and I'm your host, Frank Avila. Thank you for watching. Today we're doing a political show, and we have Adam Andrzejewski.
Perfect.
Okay, now, when you see his name on the screen, which you will, you may not be able to pronounce it as well as I did, but I've been practicing, and the staff had me say it, Andrzejewski. So it was like A-N-G-F, like E-S-K-I, something like that, right? Okay.
You must be Polish.
Okay, well, now, it's easier than Blagojevich, or maybe not because of the J and the Z's, but hopefully you're not like Rod Blagojevich as you're running for governor.
That's right. Yeah, I'm wholly different cloth than Rod Blagojevich.
Okay. Well, let's get right into it. First, let's talk a little bit about you, who you are as a person. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? Who are you? Where did you come from?
Yeah, I live in Hinsdale now with my 3 daughters. I have a 4-and-a-half-year-old, a 2-and-a-half-year-old, and an 8-month-old. I grew up downstate. I grew up in Kankakee County. I was the oldest of 7 kids. Throughout my entire education, I've been educated in Illinois public schools, so from kindergarten through Northern Illinois University. I had a good experience. After I graduated from college, my brother and I, we started a company, and we were successful with that business because we helped small businesses be successful. After I sold my shares of that company 2 years ago, I did something unique in Illinois. I started an organization dedicated to bringing good government to Illinois, and many people thought that that was impossible.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about your small business. So, as I understand it before the show, you created like yellow pages for individual municipalities. So if you lived in Wheaton, you might have one, or if you lived in Park Ridge, or whatever town you may or may not have lived in, you have your own yellow pages different than, let's say, the whole Chicago yellow pages. Is that right?
That's right. My brother and I, we started our company out of our apartments. And there was many nights that I worked just around the clock. I slept many nights in the beginning. It was just survival. Many nights on the office floor rather than my own apartment. Basically, what we did is we went after the entrenched monopoly of the yellow pages. We knew that 87% of purchases were within a 7-mile radius around your house. So rather than a 60-town directory or a 45-town directory, we produced the phone book that mirrored the shopping pattern in that area. They were very popular.
And how did you come with that idea? Just because you knew that most of the shopping was that in 7-mile radius around your house? Maybe even less. I like to go less. I don't like to drive anymore.
Right. It just makes common sense. We had actually done it back in our hometown of Herscher, Illinois, back in Kankakee County where we grew up. We knew it was very popular in Herscher, and so we just started doing towns that were a little larger. Herscher had 1,200 people, so it was a small town. We started doing towns of 2,000, and we grew from there.
Okay. Well, so you've had some private sector success. You cashed out, sold your, were you bought out by a larger company?
The name of our company was American Marketing and Publishing. So the objective always was to take it on a national basis. When that opportunity came around, I was a minority member of the limited liability company. My shares were cashed out, and so that's when I got into public policy.
Okay. So you had success, kind of right time, cashing out right time. And then
it was good timing.
Because right now, your stocks may be less right now. I don't know.
Well, at the time that I sold the shares of my business, I think one of our main competitors, their stock price was $64, and today they trade under $1. So it was one of the few times that the timing had worked out perfectly for me.
So you made a little bit of money, and you decided to go into public policy, governmental policy and politics. Is that right?
It wasn't an immediate decision. I decided to explore how Illinois was functioning versus the rest of the 50 states.
Not very well.
That's what I found. In fact, in many of the things.
So why did you start researching how Illinois was functioning?
Well, I just thought I would apply within my industry. I always compared my company up against our competitors. So I wanted to do that with our state. So first I looked at our neighbors versus Illinois. Then I looked at the 50 states versus Illinois. And what I found, it was actually disheartening to me. Because my first choice would have been to hit the beach and enjoy life a little bit. I'd worked extremely hard. I'd put my family through that experience as well. But after I found that we were the worst in things that I thought we should be the best in, I felt I didn't have a choice, and that's when I started For the Good of Illinois.
Okay. And how long did you work with this For Good of Illinois?
Well, I incorporated that in September of 2007. And so for about 18 months, I had identified a piece of public policy that I thought would make a big impact in terms of wasteful spending and corruption in Illinois.
And what was
that
piece?
is transparency.
Okay. Now, when you say transparency, talk about that a little bit. What is transparency?
What I did is I trained local people to ask their local school districts to post their spending on their websites, their check register, or their bills payable. And what this did is it started to hold our public officials accountable for their spending, and also it re-engaged people in the process of government. Here in Illinois, I think that we need to re-empower people and disempower our government to a certain extent, at least to hold them accountable for their decisions.
Okay. Now, one might argue that if you have all the expenditures up, that there creates a kind of gotcha system, that it's not actually people participating, but it's seeing, okay, well, who's getting this contract, not to have accountability, but to say, okay, I want to stop this person from getting a contract. And that in some areas, because of income or language skills or education or whatever it is, people aren't actually on their internet. So then you have a certain amount of what one member of the show calls cranks, that the people who do participate, there's people here that go to every single board meeting of every single unit of government. Some of them are very intelligent and productive, but others may have mental illness or the like. That is this really bringing kind of a citizen government, or is it just another kind of elite of people who pay attention to this and people who are trying to say, okay, I got you?
Right. It's an excellent question. And right now, if we read the newspaper headlines, the gotcha is on the people. Okay. So I'm very comfortable. People are good. There's the pent-up goodwill of the people of Illinois is ready to explode. And I am willing to put the power of government in the hands of where Lincoln said it should be put, in a government by, of, and for people. Now, I want to answer your question in full because it's very important. Among the 45 school districts that adopted this measure, among the first county in Illinois that adopted the proposal, which was DuPage, followed closely by a vote here in Cook County of 10-7 on the Cook County Board of Commissioners. In every one of these units of government,
10-7 in favor.
Yes. It was a resolution, so it's non-binding. But the newspapers have editorialized, and hopefully they'll come back and put legislation through that board to codify it and put the check register up. I think they owe that to the citizens of Cook County to show us where the spending's at. But in every single one of these units of government, every single one of them has had a good experience with posting their check registers, and the cranks just that's always an objection. It didn't bear out in practice.
Mm-hmm. Well. Now, when Commissioner Paryka posted all the salaries and the names and the titles of everybody, there was a criticism that it created a security risk, that if there was a judge or a police officer, that if that person's address or the like was on the internet, that created a security risk, especially after the assassination of one of the federal judge's family. I think it was actually she was the target and the like. So is there ever any security risk that certain vendors or certain individuals, because that includes individuals that are getting a paycheck, I'm assuming then. Is that correct? So individual employees, yeah, their salaries, that there is some privacy involved there?
Well, this is all public information, Frank. Mm-hmm. So with what Tony Paryka posted... But
there's a distinction between an individual filing a Freedom of Information request that also can be rejected or deleted out, and every piece of information on the internet for anybody to get that they could see.
Right. Tony Paryka posted, subject to his Freedom of Information Act request, what he got from government, and this was public information. So if you work for government, and my dad did work for government. For 38 years, my father was a public school teacher. And every single year in the local newspaper, just like every teacher in Illinois, it's name, title, and salary that goes in the paper. All we're doing is taking the information in terms of salaries and using the latest form of technology to post it.
Okay. Now, what about also the issue of whether or not this is a good use of taxpayer dollars? So I'm assuming this takes some time to compile the information. It takes some time to put the information on the internet, and that how many people are really interested anyways? I mean, how many hits do you get? It's just those, you know, the newspaper reporters of they can get FOIA anyways. Is this a good use of taxpayer dollars? I imagine it's going to get rid of FOIAs for those type of issues at any rate.
The best example is DuPage County. I was a resource for DuPage County Auditor Bob Grogan when he posted fiscal year 2008 over $100 million worth of checks, and he did the work, the core work he says he did with his staff in 1 hour. And he'll tell you that he did it without any single penny of cost to taxpayers. Now, that's a great example.
Now, were the checks already digitized? Is that how they did it?
Every single check register for a unit of government here in Illinois is an electronic file. And the simple reason for that is the auditors always require the information to be electronic. So there's absolutely no issues, whether it's a school district, a township. The auditors on the public information are always taking it electronically. The work is already being done. So all we're asking is that this work be turned into a PDF and proactively posted so people don't have to request it. It's our government to proactively post it on the web. Now, there's a real question of fairness here, too. As a homeowner and a property taxpayer, and I assume the same thing with you, Frank, our information as private property taxpayers is online. I can go into any public library here in Illinois and in DuPage, in the 6-county area, and I can pull anybody's. I can tell you how many bathrooms you have, bedrooms, anything about your piece of private property is public information. So it only strikes me is that putting government information online is just simple fairness.
Well, I think there's actually even a private website that has compiled that information. I think it's called Willow, or I forgot what it's called, and you could see anybody's property, including your own, put in. It doesn't cover every piece of property. I think some condominiums it doesn't cover for whatever reason in terms of the knowledge, but it does show the comparables and how much and et cetera. Sometimes even a satellite photo.
I've heard of that website. Yeah. I'm not too familiar with it, but people are compiling government information on private property taxpayers.
Well, you sold me. It sounds like it's a good idea to have your information all or most on the internet, and you still, in places like Chicago, don't have it. In fact, in the city council, you didn't even have up and down votes for a while. You'd have voice votes or whatever. There's even some voice votes, I think, still in Springfield. So a lot of what's in budgets and the like, it seems to be very hidden. Right. Still. I doubt if the city of Chicago will want to have your program in the city of Chicago.
Well, it was interesting. When Commissioner Pryka took this to the Cook County Board of Commissioners, we actually didn't know how they could ever vote it down. I have not had one school district...
But 7 people voted against it.
Now 10 to 7 was actually the worst vote out of any unit of government that I dealt with in 18 months. Okay. But it was still a positive result. So we felt really good about that.
Who were the 7 who voted against it, and what were their reasons?
At that point, I was running for governor, and I knew we had a 10-7 vote. I have not explored who the other 7 people were.
And what were their stated reasons, whoever they were?
And I don't know their reasons either, and they actually probably didn't want to be on record to that extent.
Okay. Now, so like you said, now you decided to run for governor. It seems like your program seems like a good idea. I played the devil's advocate. I asked you some questions that somebody may ask on why, whether it be cost or privacy, or if this causes kind of complications. So it sounds like a good idea. So why did you then take the next step to run for governor?
Sure. I think it was just a natural extension of my work. I saw the quick momentum that we had on bringing good government through transparency, first at the local level, then at the township level, and then at the county level. And the 2 townships, DuPage and Cook, are 2 of the largest counties, obviously, here out of the 102 counties in Illinois. So people may not have heard of me yet. I have a difficult last name. But through my being a resource for public officials and influence, soon 50% of the people of Illinois will live in a local unit of government that is of a better quality than what they did before I got started. So that is real momentum. Springfield is the problem. It has a real need, and I want to take good government to Springfield.
Okay. Now, why do you think that your background with this transparency political issue as well as you ran a very successful private sector business, why does that make you qualify to run for governor? What are your qualifications for governor, above and beyond what we've already discussed about your background?
Sure. I'm a very hard worker. And I think the combination of private sector success, spearheading one of the most successful grassroots good government movements that Illinois has ever seen, that combination coupled up with being a hard worker and an honest fella, I think that's what the citizens of Illinois want in their next governor.
Okay. Now, you mentioned honesty. Now, you said you're from Kankakee, and that brings me to mind that there's another famous governor from Kankakee, George Ryan, who was a pharmacist in Kankakee, a state rep. I think he held other posts all the way down and up through the history of his time in Kankakee. His I think it was his police chief became famous, became his inspector general, I think Dean Bauer,
right.
Who I guess was a mainstay of Kankakee politics. Maybe you knew him, maybe your father knew him. And apparently he was the guy who drove people to the airport and covered up the Willis kids' death with license CDLs for bribe scandal. So thinking about that, is Kankakee has always been a strong Republican organization, but a Republican organization run like, perhaps in Chicago, a traditional regular Democratic organization of patronage and favors. And it makes some sense, and it seems to work. Is that the type of Republican that you're out of? Are you a Republican out of the George Ryan model?
Actually...
no, I mean, apparently not from your previous things, but I just wanted to mention that.
Sure. Actually, 30 years ago, in 1976 and 1978, my father did run against George Ryan for a state representative. It was, if you ask my dad, you know, if he did run against George Ryan, he'll say he ran against more than that. He ran against the entire corrupt political machine.
He ran as a Republican or a Democrat?
My dad ran as a Democrat.
Okay.
And my dad will say that he ran against the entire corrupt political machine of Kankakee County. Now, sadly, 30 years ago, the people of Kankakee County weren't ready to reform Kankakee County. My dad lost both those elections. But it was competitive. It was a great experience growing up, and we knew George Ryan 30 years ago for exactly who he was.
Okay. So you recognized George Ryan at that time?
Right.
Okay. Because a lot of people did, actually. I will say that Paul Caprio did. A lot of Republicans went with Glenn Pouchard in the 1998 race. Ralph Rivera, Paul Caprio, Grant Noble, and some other Republicans weren't as either wise or knowledgeable or as intuitive.
And Mayor Daley went with George Ryan.
Yeah, Mayor Daley went with George Ryan. A lot of Democrats went with George Ryan against Glenn Pouchard, then the 1998.
I liked Glenn Pouchard because
I think he was
Glenn
an honest
Pouchard,
man.
as a congressman, didn't have an apartment. He slept on his congressional office floor. That resonates with me.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully he had a shower there, too. But Glenn Pouchard seemed like he was a good guy, an honest man, and the Democrats and the Republicans kind of teamed up to beat Glenn Pouchard and elect George Ryan, and that George Ryan was kind of the consummate insider. But as we've learned, perhaps that he went too far, because I think he went from a perception of being kind of a likable hack, because even in '94 when Pat Quinn ran against him, there's the issues of the state police mowing the lawn, and there were already ethical issues back then.
Back in 76 and 78, my father ran a display ad in the local newspapers. It's on my website, adam4illinois.com. The Hear No, Speak No, and See No Evil Monkeys versus Ryan. Ryan, conversely, ran an ad that said, vote for the good government team, vote for George Ryan. So oftentimes these things to the voters can look a little murky. I think people are now ready to see through these things, Frank.
Okay. But he seemed like in '94, when Pat Quinn was running the ads, and he was already accused of wrongdoing back then, let alone in '98 when he won for governor of the state of Illinois, and papers were touting him, and there was kind of mean-spirited, very negative, almost illegal or unethical, certainly, campaign against Glenn Pouchard. He was this likable hack, that he got things done.
Right.
And I think that one of the reasons people do like the machine or like regular politics is that people do like things getting done, and that they don't want a reformer who's an idiot, and they want economic growth, and that if sometimes it takes a little grease to get the wheels of government going, so be it, and that sometimes even in corrupt societies, as many of the city-states of Italy, for example, you had tremendous culture and growth and economic prosperity and jobs and trade. So that's my read on why people sometimes, and then also if you need things from government, You don't want a bureaucracy. You want some personal level, that you have a personal contact to somebody. And that was the benefit of the machine. That was the benefit of the Democratic Party or Republican organizations where, hey, I knew because I went to the pharmacy, I saw George Ryan at the pharmacy, or he's in the Elks with me, or he's in the Masons with me, or he's in the Knights of Columbus with me, or he plays on my son's baseball team. That personal connection. So how do you maintain this kind of internet, completely clean government, reform world, but yet have a personal connection that people can relate to people in government?
Sure. I think you just went through the paradigm of Illinois politics. People, as long as it's functioning, they'll deal with a little bit of the shenanigans. What we're faced with right now, though, is the shenanigans and government have grown out of control. Right now, if you're an insider, if you're a lobbyist, if you're somebody that's connected, you get paid first. And the people that are the poor, the doctors on the Medicaid and Medicare payments, and the retirees on their pensions, veterans, they all get paid last. And I think the people are sensing that the power needs to shift. And that's what my candidacy is all about. Through every dime, online, in real time, we can shed sunlight on the expenditures of our state government to lift people up and re-empower them as a part of the political process.
All right, I like that phrase, every dime, online, in real time. I'm going to have to remember that now. Now, it would seem to me that potentially or possibly you would run against Patrick Quinn. And it seems that he's also been a proponent of some of the things you're talking about, of open government. Now, whether or not he runs or whether or not he can win the Democratic primary and whether you win a Republican primary remains to be seen. But isn't Pat Quinn advocating for some of the same type of things you are, for open and transparent government, and hasn't he done it for some time?
Pat Quinn has the reputation of being a good government guy. I'm disappointed so far in Governor Pat Quinn because what we hear in the newspapers, and on Wednesday he'll announce his first piece of public policy and the legislation that he wants to get through the General Assembly.
The budget you're speaking of.
Right. And he's going to increase our taxes by 50% without instituting his good government measures first. I have a challenge for Governor Quinn. If you'll show us where you spend the money, we'll show you where to cut that wasteful spending without raising taxes.
Okay. Now, I had spoken to Pat Quinn, and I spoke to a member of his staff just yesterday. And I've talked to Pat Quinn, and he's so focused on the budget. And for what I hear from a lot of people in government, in fact, even Republicans, I was on a radio show, Tom Roser's WLS radio show, and I think I was with Senator Chris Lausen at the time. And Senator Chris Lausen, right before everything started to really break with Blagojevich, but it was getting very close, I mean, to the entire impeachment, he said that that Lisa Madigan could not sign off on the due diligence on the bonds because one of the questions is there a crisis or is there a scandal in state government, and certainly an impeachment and the arrest of the governor is a scandal, and that could lower your bond rating. So you have a real crisis in state government. I talked to some people, they were of the Jewish faith, who had some senior citizens' homes in the north side of Chicago, north suburbs. They haven't been paid, I heard, for 6 months, a year, 2 years. I've heard the same from doctors. I've heard the same from foster care, kids in foster care, parents who do foster care. So all these agencies, some up to 2 years, have not been paid. So Pat Quinn's position is, well, it's not that I want to raise taxes, but what is the only solution to, you have Pat Quinn, or Blagojevich basically had a party. People are doing things, and now your credit card bill is coming due. Well, how do you pay that bill? Not even just the current to move forward. How do you pay the past due bill? And to the extent that unemployment has increased, the income and unemployment has increased, and to the extent that incomes have decreased on a whole, you probably have less income tax going in right now to the pot.
The Illinois budget is very interesting. Illinois as a state is not growing in terms of population. Since 1998, we've grown by 4%. Since 1998,
but that's bad for revenues.
But the Illinois budget has grown by 48%. So to say that there's no place to cut, that you can't balance the budget, which, by the way, is constitutional, you have to balance the budget, to say there's no place to cut is absolutely wrong. The last time Americans for Prosperity did their Piglet book, they found nearly $2 billion that they could slice out of the budget without affecting services. So I think that we need to
okay, so where are some of the places that you could cut that you may know about right now? I understand that you have to study the whole budget, but what are some of the things you would cut? Name top 5.
The Illinois budget is one of the most opaque and unclear documents that exist. Now, myself, I've read good portions of it. My staff's read it twice. It's 467 pages long. The analogy that I like to use is you might remember, Frank, and some people in the audience watching will remember, in 1972, Paul Powell, he was then the Secretary of State here in Illinois. He died in the St. Nicholas Hotel with $800,000 of cash stuffed in shoeboxes.
At that time. Might be millions and millions today.
Absolutely. Paul Powell may have died, but the philosophy of cash stuffed in shoeboxes is alive and well in the Illinois budget. For instance, the budget will tell you that the number of fund accounts that the state government spends out of is over 700. The comptroller's website, Danny Hines' website, will tell you the number of fund accounts is 627. If we don't know the number of checkbooks in Illinois, how are we ever going to get our hands around the checks being written from the checkbooks? And that's why every dime online in real time is so important.
But still, where would you cut?
Okay. When Americans for Prosperity 3 years ago did their Piglet book, they identified nearly $2 billion worth of spending. The Democrats here in Illinois have created this crisis by taking the 2 fiscal years and combining them. And that's why you get $9 billion in terms of deficit or $11 billion in terms of deficit, is because it's 2 years into one. So the deficit in real time that we have to work with is half of that. So you got $4.5 million. Now I look around billion dollars. So I look around the country for best practices. Kathleen Sebelius, a Democrat in Kansas, she instituted forensic auditing. It doesn't take a year to do it. You can do it relatively rapidly with teams of trained accountants, and she saved Kansas, which is a much smaller state than Illinois, $1 billion on a forensic auditing program. So if Americans for Prosperity from the outside can save nearly $2 billion a couple years ago, and Sebelius can save $1 billion on forensic auditing, and if our budget's exploded by nearly 50% as our population's only grown by 4%, the dollars are there to streamline without raising taxes.
Now, we're almost out of time, and I want to make sure we give your address, your phone number, your website. It's an excellent show. We got to have you back on. You're definitely going to shake up the system here with your ideas, and I like that you're running. But one thing I want you to think about, and we might have the time to answer, what about the $20 billion and growing pension deficit? Unfunded pensions. We're headed towards a crisis. Well, and I think one of the members of your staff, Bruno Barron, had talked about it last year and the like.
On my website, I actually have the total debt of Illinois, which is $114 billion and growing. We're the second worst state in America on total debt. The pension debt, the figure I'm getting from the latest news reports, is $79 billion of unfunded pensions. And our pension debt is the worst in the country. Real quickly,
phone number, website, address.
Phone number is 630-899-9191. That's the office. Adam4illinois.com, all spelled out.
Glad it's not your last name.
We're in Elmhurst.
Elmhurst, Illinois. What address?
Adam Andrzejewski.
Okay. And what's your address?
The address is 116 South York Street in Elmhurst.
Okay. Thank you for being on our show, Adam.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you for watching. Goodbye. God bless.